Crucifixion is one of the oldest and most brutal forms of capital punishment, known for its extreme cruelty and suffering. It was first used by the Persians between 300 and 400 BC. From Persia, it spread to Carthage, Greece, and most famously Rome. Crucifixion is often associated with Jesus Christ, the founder of Christianity, who was crucified by the Romans in 33 AD. As gruesome and horrific as crucifixion is, the way one succumbs to it is not very straightforward and is rather complex. In this video, I'll explain the science of crucifixion, how it works, and why it was one of the worst methods of capital punishment in history. This is Dark Science. In theory, nailing an adult body to hang on a cross seems like a simple undertaking. Nail the hands and feet to wooden beams, and the rest will take care of itself. However, this theory falls apart when physics and physiology are applied. Not taking into account the weight of an adult body and the weak structural support in human bone and tissue causes several issues. For one, bones and tissue in the hands and feet are not strong enough to hold the body up. The bones in the palm of the hand, called the metacarpals, are fairly weak. They connect the fingers to the wrist and don't have load-bearing properties. In fact, the metacarpals are known to fracture given a strong enough impact. Placing a nail in between these bones makes for a very weak anchor. Since the palm tissue and metacarpal bones are not strong enough to support the weight of the body, gravity pulls the bones and soft tissue of the palm through the anchored nail. The individual would come loose from the cross, causing the process to be restarted. Instead of the palm, the nail was placed in a lower position in between the radius and ulna, at the base of the forearm. The radius and ulna make up the forearm. They are both very dense and strong bones as they serve a load-bearing function. Driving a nail between the two bones ensured a structurally sound anchor point to keep the body fixed on the cross. There is a large nerve, called the medial nerve, that runs from the forearm through the wrist, between the radius and ulna, and into the fingers. Hammering a nail into this nerve would cause excruciating pain. Next, the feet would be nailed to the cross by driving nails through the heels. The front of the foot was not a good nail placement to hold the body. Bones in the top of the foot, called the tarsal bones, are a group of 7 individual bones, designed for flexibility, shock absorption, and balance. Their function is not to support weight. Driving a nail through the tarsal bones would cause bone and tissue to tear, as the weight of the body pushed down on it. By contrast, the heel, or the calcaneus bone, is responsible for transferring weight of the body to the ground. It's able to serve this function because it's a single solid bone that can handle heavy weight. Driving a nail through the side of the heel bone secures the body in place. In 1968, an archaeological team in Jerusalem discovered a heel bone from a crucified man in the 1st century. The bone had a nail driven through the side of it. This indicated that the feet were anchored into the sides of the cross, and not the front of the foot as originally thought. Once nailed to the cross, the individual would begin to have difficulty breathing. Muscles involved with breathing, such as the intercostal muscles and diaphragm, are physically hindered from working when the body is in a crucified position. The diaphragm is a dome-shaped muscle that sits below your lungs. When you inhale, the diaphragm contracts and moves downward, creating more volume in the chest cavity. Air flows into the lungs and they enlarge, allowing you to breathe. When you exhale, the diaphragm relaxes and moves upward, pushing air out of the lungs. The intercostal muscles are thin sheets of muscle fibers located in between the ribs. They allow breathing by moving the chest wall in and out. For example, when you inhale, the intercostal muscles move the chest wall outward, increasing volume in the chest cavity to make room for the expanding lungs. When you exhale, the muscles move the chest wall inward to help push air out of the lungs. The diaphragm and intercostal muscles work together to allow you to breathe. But during crucifixion, when the arms are stretched, the chest and intercostal muscles are pulled outward. With the muscles locked in this outward position, the chest wall cannot move inward to push air out of the lungs. As a result, the ability to exhale is hindered. You can somewhat feel this yourself. Stand against a wall with your arms in a partial Y stance for about 10 seconds. Inhale and exhale deeply several times in a row. You will begin to notice you cannot breathe in as much, and the breaths become more shallow. This is because not all the air is leaving your lungs, and as a result, less is going in. Also, in this position, the diaphragm is elongated and cannot contract. This prevents it from relaxing and pushing air out of the lungs, thereby further hindering exhaling. Over time, as gravity pulls the body downward, the arms and chest become so stretched that they are hyperextended. This severely hinders the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, and the individual suffocates. In order to breathe, the individual could push themselves up into an elevated position to decrease the amount of stretching on the arms and chest. This, of course, would cause immense pain to the feet. Sometimes, a footrest called a suppedaneum could be added to the cross. This gave the crucified a firm platform to push up on to breathe better. However, being able to breathe also meant they would live longer and extend their own suffering. Eventually, they will succumb to asphyxiation after several hours or even days, either from lack of a footrest or their legs being unable to hold them up from sheer exhaustion. Asphyxiation occurs when the body is pulled down so far that the breathing muscles seize up, stopping all exhalation. With the ability to exhale being stopped, they cannot breathe in oxygen, as there is too much carbon dioxide built up in the lungs and blood. With no oxygen available, they suffocate for a few minutes, and shortly after succumb to respiratory failure. Crucifixion was a method of execution in which the individual slowly suffocated. This happened when the breathing muscles were stretched to failure by the weight of their own body, all the while suffering from the painful wounds of being nailed to a cross. The Romans described the gruesome method of crucifixion as ex crucio, which is the word we know today as excruciating. Thank you for watching Dark Science.